Hello, I'm Caleb, Clinical Director at Therapevo and a certified sex addiction therapist. Today we're addressing one of the most painful and confusing questions a person can ever ask. Is my spouse a sex addict? If you're asking this, you are likely feeling overwhelmed and frightened. You may be experiencing confusion right now, deep hurt, or a whole lot of uncertainty about your next steps. Probably feeling like the distress of the consequences of all this, and you need clear answers. So my goal in this video is to provide you the understanding and clarity that you deserve during this very difficult time. Sexual addiction, also known as compulsive sexual behavior, is a complex mental health condition that affects many individuals and the people who love them. Recognizing the signs and understanding the true nature of sex addiction becomes a powerful starting point for addressing its impact on your partner, your relationship, your marriage perhaps, and your emotional well-being. So let's get into it. Now, just as we're jumping in, for those of you who follow our show, you're probably used to seeing me record this with my wife, Verlinda, who is also a counselor. But today, as I record this, she's actually teaching a class on human lifespan development at a nearby college. And so you just get me for this episode, as well as the next 3 videos on our Normalize Therapy YouTube channel. But she will be back, I promise. So what is sex addiction? First, I need to be absolutely clear. Sex addiction is a real, tangible challenge that is rooted in deeper emotional and psychological wounds. It's not simply a relationship issue or a matter of willpower, like just choosing to stop. It's crucial for you to understand that sex addiction isn't caused by a lack of love or attraction toward you, but rather it stems from underlying psychological struggles that require specialized professional support. Sex addiction mirrors other addictions, such as substance abuse. It involves compulsive behaviors, intense cravings, and difficulty stopping despite devastating consequences. Studies suggest that sex addiction may affect about 3 to 10% of the US population, though this number is likely higher due to the shame and secrecy that surround it. While it's often associated with men, it's important to know that women can and do struggle with sex addiction as well. The core of this condition is a loss of control. It's a pattern where sexual fantasies, urges, or behaviors become all-consuming, leading to significant personal, financial, or relational distress. And we'll get into some of the criteria and even the assessments for sex addiction, but I want to talk to you before that for a moment about what sex addiction is not. First, sex addiction is not a high libido. And I've come across individuals, particularly from religious or faith backgrounds, that had a lot of negative messaging around sexuality. And some of these individuals, when they get married, discover that they really enjoy sexual intimacy with their spouse. But because of the negative messaging, they then start to carry a lot of guilt about how much they look forward to and how much they enjoy and how often they engage in sexual intimacy with their spouse. And it's not very often, but occasionally someone like this asks me if they're sex addicted. They're just genuinely concerned. So let me reassure you, that is not an addiction. You just go ahead and enjoy yourself. If you're from a Christian background like I am, remember that the Bible says that every good and perfect gift comes from God our Father. So you just go ahead and enjoy yourselves. Now, sex addiction is also not always an affair, and not even necessarily a string of 2 or 3 affairs. Generally speaking, in that sense, but granted, like discovering this can lead you to wondering, like if you've seen these affairs, there is a possibility that the affairs you've discovered are just the tip of the iceberg for a vast array of sexual acting out behaviors. But I do want to say that in many cases, people who commit infidelity are not and probably never will be sex addicts. Again, when we get into some of the screening tools and I share some of the formal criteria, you'll see the difference. But the short answer is you want to look for the specifically addictive components. The repeated efforts to stop, the withdrawal symptoms, the escalation of behaviors over time. Those are the things that distinguish this from an affair or even having 2 or 3 affairs across a period of lifetime. It doesn't mean that your betrayal experience then is less because they're just affairs, but it's important to understand what you're dealing with so that you understand the best path forward. If there has been an affair or affairs, it's still highly recommended that you enter into individual therapy and eventually couples therapy. And then finally on this point, I want to say that sex addiction is also not porn addiction under another label. The two are distinct. While some individuals struggling with sex addiction may frequently engage in pornography or with cybersex, sexual addiction encompasses a much broader range of compulsive sexual behaviors. And those behaviors include all sorts of reckless sexual activity, excessive masturbation, frequent one night stands, infidelity, paying for sexual services, seeking out strangers for sexual encounters, or involvement with sex workers and strip clubs and things like that, and more. But porn addiction is more limited in the sense that does not involve in person acting out behaviors. Having said that, porn addiction can escalate into sex addiction, so we do recommend early intervention. Along these lines, sex addiction is not synonymous with sex offending, although many sex offenders may also struggle with sexual addiction. If your partner has committed offending behaviors, it's important to know that a sex addiction treatment specialist is actually insufficient for treating offenders. It's above our pay grade, pardon the bug, and in fact, many jurisdictions, the law says that only registered sex offender treatment providers can actually work with that population. So you do need to check what is happening in your local jurisdiction if there are offending behaviors involved. But there's a lot of sex addiction out there that occurs without offending. So you might be asking, what are the criteria for sex addiction? To answer this question, is my partner a sex addict? These are the primary criteria that we look for. The first is the loss of control over sexual actions and compulsive behaviors despite repeated efforts to stop. The second is preoccupation with sexual thoughts and fantasies that dominate daily life. The third is the inability to fulfill personal, professional, or relational obligations due to compulsive sexual behavior. The fourth is continuation of sexual activities despite devastating consequences such as relationship breakdown, legal problems, or physical and mental health deterioration. The fifth, escalation of sexual behaviors to satisfy increasing cravings, so that's escalating over time. And the sixth is experiencing withdrawal symptoms when unable to engage in sexual acts. So those are the criteria that we look for more formally. Now, in terms of actual assessments, the first one that I want to talk to you about is the Sex Addiction Screening Test, revised, sometimes known as the SAST. It's one of the most widely available screening tools, has been used in at least 8 published peer-reviewed empirical studies, and is routinely used in practice at large inpatient facilities and by many of us certified sex addiction therapists across the United States and Canada. Originated in 1989, it has been subsequently revised to adjust to homosexual or female populations as well. In our practice, we use this as part of a larger assessment called the SDI, which is a very comprehensive bundle of assessments that form an effective basis for planning treatment of sexual addiction. However, the SAST-R is freely available on the internet and is a great tool to use at the start of therapy to begin to understand the severity of a person's addiction. So it is an excellent resource. There's also PATHOS, which is an acronym. Because the SAST is a little bit long, some folks also have developed this assessment called the PATHOS. It's just 6 questions long and has had a couple of studies already done to establish its validity. And these are the questions. Do you often find yourself preoccupied with sexual thoughts? So that's the P of PATHOS. Do you hide some of your sexual behavior from others? That's the A. Have you ever sought help for sexual behavior you did not like? That's the T. Has anyone been hurt emotionally because of your sexual behavior? That's the H. Do you feel controlled by your sexual desire? That's O for out of control. And when you have sex, do you feel depressed afterwards? That's the S, which is sad. So if your spouse could answer yes to 3 or more of these questions, and I have a caveat in a moment here, we gently recommend that you reach out to a certified sex addiction therapist who can walk alongside you with this healing journey. Please remember that this is quite an informal assessment, though, and there's always the possibility of a false positive or a false negative. So connecting with a qualified, compassionate clinician will help you gain the clarity and support that you deserve for a proper understanding of your particular situation. So, for example, it's really good to remember that professionals interpret these assessments with more nuance than you may. So, for instance, you might consider an example of, say, a 22-year-old who is struggling with pornography, perhaps viewing it once a week. He could easily answer yes to 4, 5, or even 6 of those questions. But labeling him as a sex addict would really overstate and misrepresent the true nature of his challenge and potentially cause unnecessary distress. Many of the young adults that we've had the privilege of supporting through pornography addiction find their path to recovery and maintain a lasting sobriety often just lasts to 10 or 14 counseling sessions. But in contrast to that, someone with sex addiction typically embarks on a 3 to 5 year therapeutic journey to build the robust foundation of sobriety and healing that they deserve and that they need. Yeah, initial sobriety often comes within weeks or a few months, or might be there right out of the gate with treatment. But the amount of work it takes to get into a well established sobriety from sex addiction is much, much more than it takes for a common pornography addiction. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, beyond these formal assessments, such as the PATHOS test or the SAST, there are other common signs that partners often recognize. The first is secrecy and deception. This is the hallmark of addiction. You might find hidden email accounts, secret phone bills, a second phone, or mysteriously clear browser histories. You may hear elaborate lies about the person's whereabouts, why they were late, or what they were doing on their computer, stuff like that. The second thing that often is noticed is financial issues. And this can look like unexplained credit card charges, money missing from joint accounts, or transactions you can't account for, cash that just kind of goes missing, often used for purchasing sex, paying for webcam services, or fun encounters, that type of thing. The third is significant emotional and physical withdrawal. So you may feel a growing distance. They might seem emotionally or physically less intimate as their focus is really consumed by their addiction. And finally, you may notice a lot of failed attempts to stop, especially if you're seeing the behaviors more and more apparently. You may have even confronted them and they promised, I will never do it again. And they were filled with remorse and the tears were there. But then the behavior returns. This pattern of vowing to stop and then relapsing is a classic sign that their behavior is out of their own control. And as I like to challenge my clients, repeated, regular relapsing is not addiction relapsing. It's addiction with a lot of unsuccessful white knuckling. Yes, any recovery journey will involve some relapses, but these should be more like surprises than expectations. So if there's a lot of relapsing going on, you still have a lot of addiction work to do. And this brings us back to one of the most important points that I want you to hear today about all of this. And that is that this is not your fault. The person watching this, you, the partner or spouse, you did not cause this. Your actions, your body, your level of affection, none of that is the cause of this other person's, your partner's, your spouse's sex addiction. The root causes of sex addiction are always deeper. They're always found within the addict. And they generally fall into three categories. The first, and the one I see most in my practice, is significant childhood trauma. This can be overt, severe trauma, like the physical, sexual, or emotional abuse kind of thing, or it can be more subtle, like emotional neglect, perhaps not obvious at first, but profound when you really consider it, or even things like growing up in a highly rigid, shaming environment where emotions were not allowed. Surveys of the sex addicted population indicate high prevalences of these issues. Emotional abuse, 97%. Sexual abuse, 81%. Physical abuse, 72%. And these early experiences have deep emotional wounds and create a boatload of unacknowledged pain and trauma carried deep in the nervous system of recovering sex addicts. The second area that we look into is attachment disturbances and disruptions. Attachment is the science of love. And the way that a child is loved, not loved, or loved in disorganized or unpredictable ways during their early formative years will form a template for emotional and physical intimacy as an adult. A well established recovery plan must treat attachment disturbances in sex addicts. And again, this is not about you as a partner, but about what they experienced long before you even met your spouse. The third area is co occurring mental health conditions. Addiction rarely travels alone. It's often a coping mechanism, a failed solution for unbearable pain from or related to anxiety or otherwise expressed as anxiety, depression, even bipolar disorder, or other addictions. As we start to wind down this video, I want to shift the focus to you, to the partner, because what you're experiencing and the pain you're feeling right now, it has a name. It's called betrayal trauma. Betrayal is a profound and specific type of wound. It's the shock and shattering of your reality that comes from discovering this level of deception from the one person you trusted to keep you safe. You should have been able to trust them. But the symptoms of betrayal trauma actually mirror those of PTSD. You might feel hypervigilant, like you've become a detective in your own home, you're checking phones, bank statements. You might have intrusive thoughts, nightmares, flashbacks. You might feel emotionally numb one minute and then intensely angry and full of rage the next. And while these behaviors seem extreme, they're actually a normal, healthy response to deeply abnormal and traumatic situation. Your sense of safety has been broken. Your world, as you knew it, and your dreams and hopes for the future have been shattered. And that is a real, genuine, traumatic experience. Now, that brings us to the question that I know is on your mind. Can my marriage be reclaimed? Can this relationship be saved? The honest answer is yes, it probably can. Now, of course, both parties have to be willing. But if you do save your marriage, it will be different. It has to be different. And it'll probably be an amazing kind of a different with more connection, much more real, much safer feeling. But recovery, like when both partners are fully committed to their own healing, can create a new relationship built on a foundation of rigorous honesty. It can lead to a level of intimacy and connection that was never possible before because the secrets are now gone. But being honest with you here, it is a long, difficult, bumpy road. It's hard work. It requires the person with the addiction to take full ownership, full responsibility, to live a life of transparency, to do the hard work of healing their own trauma, those roots that are behind or underneath this addiction. And it requires the spouse to do the hard work of healing the betrayal trauma that has been placed on them by the actions of the person who was unfaithful. It is possible to rebuild trust, but it takes time and it takes professional guidance. Now, I know this information can be overwhelming and it can be a lot to process. The pain you're feeling, though, is real, but so is the potential for healing. You don't have to walk this path alone. You don't have to be the detective, the forensic analyst, the therapist, the wounded partner all at once, and still be maybe a wife and a mother and everything else that you're doing. At Therapevo, our team includes certified sex addiction therapists and therapists who specialize in this exact journey. We're trained to guide the partner through betrayal trauma and to guide the addict through addiction recovery. And we work via secure Zoom video call so we can meet with you wherever feels private and safe for you. The very first step to this process is a consultation, and we offer a free, confidential 20-minute phone call. There's no judgment there, just a clear path forward, a place to talk, and to start this journey. Visit the link in the description to book your free consultation today. You deserve support. That's all for today's episode. You can get the full show notes at therapevo.com/298.